Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Krav Coffee. For those of you who have joined me for episodes 1 through 8 or 1 through 7, oh man, it messed it up again. I'm sorry. I needed a technical assistant because every time it posts, it's pepper spray. What's the deal?
Oh my God, that's funny.
It keeps resetting back to that last
pepper
one.
spray?
Did you not see my pepper spray one?
Oh.
Yeah, I tested out.
Yes, I did actually, and your mother got really pissed.
Yeah, she wasn't very happy about it.
Yeah.
But hey, due diligence. So I will correct that once we're done.
Makes me think of Jerry Seinfeld. What's the deal with pepper spray?
Yeah, basically. Yep. All right. So privacy is set. Anyone can watch. Anyone can share. So if you're new to Krav Coffee, during the coronavirus pandemic, when we weren't allowed to get together to train, I took the opportunity to say, hey, let's talk about everything that happens with self-protection and self-defense before you get physical. And there's my dog in the background saying hi. So I've been trying to have candid conversations about what it really means to protect yourself. And more often than not, self-protection starts way before a punch is thrown. So we've had now 8 weeks to discuss the mental game that comes with self-protection. I wanted to take the opportunity to speak with these wonderful women about what you can do to identify and assist people who may be in a situation that involves domestic or intimate partner abuse. And the thing of it is, as I've learned, is that it doesn't start with physical violence more often than not. I can remember sitting in a seminar that Amelia was running, and she's like, it would be really easy if the guy punched you in the face on the first date. She'd be like, hey, you're a bad guy. We shouldn't be in a relationship. This is unhealthy. But it doesn't go that way. So there's a lot that happens before the physicality. And whether you are in that situation or whether you are people in that situation, if you can identify the mental, emotional, financial side of that abuse before it turns physical, then you can save yourself and your friends a lot of extra trauma, for lack of a better word there. So today, we'll be discussing the realities of domestic violence and what you can do to help end the cycle as a friend or a colleague. On Friday, we talked about if you were a health professional, what you could do to help your patients and your clients. And today we're going to talk about what you can do to help your friends and family. The reason that this came up is because during a pandemic, when everyone is self-isolating, we're missing that social interaction to help see what's going on. Baron, shh. All right, you want to say hi?
Hi, Baron.
Oh, that sneeze ended up with a headbutt. So as we ourselves are isolating from our friends, we're not able to see and hear the conversations as well as we did prior to COVID. And even when we hear and see, we might not know what to do about it or what it means, even if our spidey sense goes off like, that was an odd answer, or that was an odd way to answer. we're just not there to kind of catch that as often. I completely lost my train of thought. I had something I wanted to say after that. But anyway, I'm sure I'll remember and we'll keep going. Today, I'm joined by Amelia, who is the Director of Education for the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. Athena, who is how long have you been a 911 operator?
23 years.
23 years of being on the other end of that 911 call. Besides that, she has been my mentor for teaching women self-protection. She's an accomplished martial artist and just an all-around wonderful person. So is Amelia, by the way. You're an all-around one. And then we have Dr. Joy Ricasa, who is dual boarded in family medicine and sports medicine, and a master communicator. So if you guys tuned in on Friday, you saw that Joy was able to relate the cycle of change that someone could be going through in a domestic violence relationship to trying to quit smoking. So she took something that was big and scary and kind of separated from normalcy and brought it into the mainstream to help people make that connection that you go through a cycle. If you're trying to quit smoking or you're trying to start exercising or you're trying to eat more healthfully, it's not just like, I'm going to decide to do this and then it happens. There's a bit of a cycle that happens. So hopefully, Joy, if you don't mind, and Amelia, you guys can kind of work together to explain that again. Because like we were saying before we went on camera, I was hanging out with some of my Krav friends last night, and I talked about that conversation and they're like, what? No way. So it's just another perspective on a person's quality of life that you just don't know that you don't know. So there's nothing wrong. You haven't failed as, a friend or a self-protection instructor or, a physical therapist in the field if you don't know that thought process. But it's just another tool for your toolbox to help figure some things out. So would you guys mind starting with that since I alluded to it?
So I'll intro it if Amelia, you'll explain the stages again, because hilariously last time I was like, oh my God, I might not remember all of the stages because all my patients are always in the pre-contemplative or contemplative stage. So I hardly ever have to talk about the other ones. But basically what we were talking about is something called the biopsychosocial model for behavioral change. And that's basically, from my perspective as a physician, a really easy way to just categorize where someone is with regards to changing a behavior. The one that I cite all the time is smoking. What we're talking about here is, choosing to leave a situation that is not healthy. Interestingly enough, it works for any kind of behavioral change. So the other things that Anne was mentioning was like, starting to eat more veggies, or maybe I will, exercise 5 days a week, and things like that. And the other part of the approach to there is once you can assess what stage of change the person is in, you can tailor your conversation for motivational coaching. So that's basically like, you're in this stage, let me offer you the next stages. So or let me give you a little bit of like a taste of what the next stage could be like, and then you could go there when you're ready. So yeah, Amelia, will you list the stages again?
Sure. So everybody starts in what we call the pre-contemplative stage. It's when we are not aware that there's a problem. We don't really want to change the problem. There is no intention in changing the behavior. So in terms of, smoking, as Joy so eloquently puts it, it would be like, yeah, I'm a smoker. Yeah, I'm sure it's bad for my health. No, I don't want to quit. In terms of domestic violence, it might be this is a fine relationship, and all relationships go through struggles, and we can work this out. It's not a problem. The next stage we get into is like the contemplative stage, where we actually are contemplating change. We are aware that there's a problem, but we're not committing to doing anything about it, right? So with smoking, yes, I know this is bad for my health. Yes, I know, that I've lost people in my family to lung cancer, but I don't really know how to start, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to start quitting right now. And that would be the same in an abusive relationship. Yes, I'm aware that this isn't okay, but I don't have a plan in place or any tools at my disposal right now to start planning a way to leave and change this situation. And then we move from the contemplative stage into the preparation stage. In the preparation stage, this is where we actually are set on taking an action, and we can start planning how we are going to address this. So, with smoking, it could be, I'm going to start exercising more because that makes my cravings go down. Or maybe I'll, use Nicorette and chew Nicorette gum. And we can start considering ideas of things that can help us. With the preparation stage for leaving an abusive relationship, it might be, looking up online for the first time the domestic violence center in your community and talking to a friend about, I think I want to leave. The action stage follows the preparation stage. That's where you actually take the first step, that first action to end that behavior, whether it be, I throw away my pack of cigarettes and I buy the Nicorette gum and I start using that for a little bit of time. Or I actually leave the relationship. I make that phone call to the domestic violence center. I go in for an appointment. I learn what I need to do, and I end that relationship in a safe way with support. And then we move into what we call the maintenance stage. So after we've changed that behavior, we have to be able to maintain it, right? And stay on that positive, forward moving track. So in that, this is where we want to sustain the change and begin new behaviors. So when it comes to smoking, as Joy said, what was it, 2 to 3 times it takes to, successfully quit. And then we talk about abusive relationships, 4 to 7 times it can take for someone to leave that relationship before they actually are, committed and done with it. So what we often see is the maintenance stage will fade into the relapse stage, in which we fall back into those same patterns of behaviors. I pick up a cigarette, I smoke it again. I call up my partner, I tell them I miss them, we're back together again. And that's okay, because one of the important things about the stages of change is they are, a cycle, but it's a cycle with an upward spiral. In that, Joy made a really good point on Friday night that we learn every time we relapse. We learn what it was that caused us to relapse. We learn what we need to avoid next time when we're in that action and then maintenance stage to really sustain that change and then break that cycle. So those are the stages of change.
Talk amongst yourselves. My dog has just decided he wants to go outside again. I'm sorry. Sorry for the interruptions. But hey, this is why this is a candid conversation. Real life happens. So
yes, absolutely.
Yes. I think it's really important to talk about the stages of change, especially when it comes to abusive relationships, though, because I think that especially those who have not been in an abusive relationship can see these things as cut and dry. This is abusive. You need to leave. Why are you staying? And we talked about this a little bit on Friday, as like people will think that, I hate this, but that like you're allowing the abuse and you're putting up with it and things like that. And what it comes down to is I just might not be in that stage of change where you think I should be. But, when we can understand those stages better, we can actually identify where the people we care about, our friends, our family members, our loved ones, where they are in the stages of change. And as Joy said, we can make an effort with our actions and our words to help them move into
I think that it
the
has a
next
lot to
stage.
do with the like false concept of what normal is. Like, what the hell really is normal? There is no real normal. Like, it's all relative, right? So, like, relatively speaking, he hits me less than the guy before. Relatively speaking, I eat more salads than I used to. Relatively speaking, I vape instead of smoke, right? And so, and part about like the change between like the active stage to the maintenance stage is the like defining your new normal, right? So that's the whole for example, like I gave up sugar, right? And all of the sudden, when you go from the active stage of giving up all sugar to the maintenance stage is when you have that like you accidentally got the sweet tea. I'm obviously in the South versus the unsweet tea. And like you're like, oh my God, it's so sweet. Right. Like, so that's your new normal. So I think that that's really it. It's a perception, right? And there is no such thing as exactly what is normal. And, we can even look at other people's relationships and be like, that is not healthy. And again, what is that to you? And what is that to that person? And so it's certainly a change in their perspective. And that's when they make that change is when they change their stage. Aside from that, you can't shove people into the different stages. You can literally just open the door and be like, look what it looks like in there. It's pretty cool. All right, let me know.
So, Athena, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, it's so much about like in those phases and stuff and recognizing where they're at, but it's so hard for a person that's not a trained professional to do so. They just see their friend that gets talked down to, treated poorly, beaten or something like that and says, let's leave, let's go. But again, I've found that because of cultural issues, sometimes like one of my first friends that I ever dealt with was back home in Texas when we were like in our early 20s. And she was her husband, a new husband, was a real ass and got to very physically shoving her, but left no marks. And she knew it was increasing, but her mom said, "Well, this is our culture. Shut up and don't say anything and make him happy." And that's what her mom told her. And I was like, "That's not right. He shouldn't be treating you like that." So through all the years, I think that I've learned to ask the people, "Is this okay with you? Is this being talked to this way? Is this being treated this way? Are you okay with this? How do you feel about it?" Because I can't drag them out of that situation. I can only make them recognize that somebody that loves you should not treat you this badly. You would not treat somebody else this badly. Somebody should not treat you this badly, and they have to recognize it. And then the question is, what do you want to do about it? Because I, again, can't drag them out of it, no matter even if they're in the contemplative state or whatever, or recognizing it, or almost to the action state, that I can't make them do it. I can't save them. And that's the hardest part, because we have that with 911. I can't make this never happen again. So it's like, you were saying is make them recognize, what they want to do with it.
I think a lot of that also is like, again, perspective, right? So, I will have, I'm going to make this part up, but like, I have a patient that's like, well, I am going to lower my cholesterol by hopping on one foot 5 times a day. That's a thing, like that's what they say, right? And I'm like, so it's like not a thing, but I see, I hear you, like, and I hear your perspective, but just to let you know, I mean, hopping on one foot probably going to make that quad nice and strong on that one side. So you go on and do that. Not going to hurt you. But just so you know, there's no evidence for that. But there's evidence for other things for lowering your cholesterol. So, I'm going to give you information about that. So, like literally sometimes some people don't know that there is that thing on the other side. So like Athena's example is like, so not all marriages and cultures are like that. Just so like FYI, some of that's called assault, and there's things called laws. But also in your culture, that's apparently accepted. So I think that that's like, and again, you don't want to. It feels almost like, I will say, evangelic, if you will, kind of like, hey, by the way, my definition of a healthy relationship is this, and all of that other stuff. So there's that whole concept of like, my normal is not necessarily your normal is not necessarily mine, but just so you know, this is what mine looks like, and now I know what yours looks like, and I don't want anything to do with yours, but like you might want some to do with mine. So there you go. And but yeah, I think that, and again, like for me, and probably for Amelia, like I can, like I identify those stages really quickly because honestly, it's efficiency for me. And like in the example that Anne gave the other time about when I was talking to her, and I was like, hey, so I kind of want to tell you something, but like I don't want you to take it in the wrong way or whatever. So like it's kind of like a basketball. Okay, do you have your hands up? Because I kind of want to throw something at you, but I'm not necessarily sure you're ready to catch it. I think it's kind of like that same concept of like, hey, I'm just gonna lob this ball at you. Of maybe that relationship is not the best thing ever. You're not growing with them, or you're growing next to them. You're growing against them, or something like that. But yeah, this stuff is very gray, and I think that that's why it's gray until it's not. And then there's that boundary event that leaves a mark. There's that boundary event where like all of a sudden you're calling out of work because you have a black eye and you cannot cover it up with however much makeup, or you're like me and you don't know how to use makeup. Or like that kind of thing. And then the switch flips and you're considering going from pre-contemplative to contemplative. Like, oh damn, nah, I can't take off this much time of work because my black eye is taking 4 weeks to go away, like that kind of thing.
But like we had a caller that one time, and I told Ann the story, and it was a really bad beating she took this call. And the guy's out there screaming, looking for her. And she's hiding underneath the porch with a bloody face. And none of the neighbors came, nothing. And we asked her, has this ever happened? But we always ask on domestics, has this ever happened before? And because it kind of sets you up for understanding the mindset of the victim, it's like, so that when the officer walks in, they know what kind of like what the scenario is of how many times this has happened and what they're going to walk into. And anyway, she said, yes, but never this bad. And so it's like, but how many times had that happened over, so many years? And it's, and that's the stuff you struggle with, because you're like, the first time you see it as a friend, you're like, let's go, let's get out of there. I'm taking you somewhere, and they're not ready to go. And that's really hard to struggle with their mindset.
And I think that's such an important point that you bring up, is that oftentimes, especially those who aren't prepared yet, will almost undermine their own experience. It's never been this bad. The other thing that we experience in our hotline calls at the Domestic Violence Center is, no, this has never happened before. This is the first time it's ever been physical. But there has been probably years, of emotional and psychological and verbal abuse that has led up to this. And that's a whole part of it that people don't see. We think of domestic abuse, and we think of like the old school, like battered women's movement, and you think of actual physical abuse. And there is so much more that goes into it, that psychological abuse and control, the verbal abuse and control. It's all about breaking down that person's sense of self-worth and their understanding of their own experiences, in that they've undermined and invalidated these experiences so many times that I'm even starting to undermine and invalidate these experiences myself. I look for the excuses as well, because they always have an excuse that seems and feels logical to me at this point. So that's a really important part to talk about, for sure. And Joy had talked about, or I believe Athena had talked about the cultural barriers. And one of my favorite things to talk about, and I have a slide, I pulled it up here, is I talk a lot, and we had talked about this on Friday, about the cycle of abuse and how these relationships are often cycling through really beautiful, loving times into more abusive times and then back and forth, which can create this smokescreen and make it confusing for a victim survivor to really identify, which way is up, which way is down, what's abusive, what's not abusive, what's love, what's not love. But beyond that, I have a slide, and the title is "Why Didn't You Just Leave?" Because that's my least favorite question, but I feel like that is the most common question that we will hear asked of survivors of domestic violence. And that cultural isolation, those cultural barriers, that's a huge part of it. And I have that with like over a dozen other logical, real life reasons why people have a hard time leaving, from financial dependence on their partner to those familial, cultural, religious pressures to stay, threats of losing their children. So, we know, and we experience this a lot at Domestic Violence Center, that abusers will drag you through the custody system for years and years and years. If you sneeze the wrong way during a custody exchange, they'll sue you for contempt, not being aware of the resources that are available in their community, not having the financial means to access those resources. If I can't take the day off of work to go to court, if I can't afford an attorney to go to court, things like that. If I don't have anywhere to go, that's a huge part of it. Maybe threats of extortion. So one of those things is sextortion that we see a lot. Partners who might have exchanged, nude photographs before and threatening to share and expose those things if you leave the relationship. But then one of the realistic fears that I think that people often set aside because they think you leave and you're safe is that violence escalates when you leave or when you attempt to leave. And that's when we see the physical abuse rates skyrocket. And that's actually when we see the homicide rates skyrocket in these cases. And so that was just one thing I wanted to bring up, is that you brought up a great point, Athena, that there's so much more that goes into, keeping people in these relationships besides the stages of change and the phases of their own
And sometimes
readiness.
it's even, I've seen people that are prepared to leave, and then they, like you said, they tell a friend, and the friend's reaction will cause them not to leave, whether they're like, oh, don't tell me that, because they don't want to be involved in it. Or the person says, I don't have anywhere to go. Can I come to your house? And the person goes, no, I'm afraid of your husband. And one lady stayed in a marriage for 40 years because she felt she had nowhere to go. And she had stayed there trying to protect her children. When she left after 40 years, her children turned on her. And so it was really, really hard for her. And none of her friends would take her in because they were afraid of her husband. And it was that had kept her in that relationship so long, because even her preacher had told her wanted to counsel her on being a good wife and a good couple. And it was like, she was afraid then to address it with the preacher and the husband, like for counseling, because then her husband would be more angry that she'd brought it out.
Yes.
So 40 years she sat in that.
That's exactly it. And we see that so often at the Domestic Violence Center too, is that, it's how you and the support systems in your life, how they respond to it makes such a huge impact on if you leave.
So it's even as we as just individuals need to be aware of how we respond to people really reacts or really causes their reaction in a way that in so many things in life could shut them down. It's like just by going, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So in medicine, you don't do that.
Oh man.
You don't do it in counseling,
that
either.
Gonna fall off for sure. You're screwed.
Oh my God, that thing is nasty. You don't do that, which is, and it's, and again, as a self-proclaimed lack of filter person, sometimes, well, my husband will even be like, how do you put up with that? And I'm like, you have a lot of internal conversation where you're like, yo, that is gross. And then later you're like, all right, so, that you've been smelling that for 6 months, so you can't smell it, but I can. And kind of a little funky. So absolutely. I think that, and there's that right amount of appalling though, right? Because you don't want to be like, yeah, no big deal, your toe's gonna fall off. But you want to be like, so it shouldn't look like that. I have some concerns because I see this, that, and the other, and those are very concrete concerns, right? It's not like, oh, your toenail is like you painted it purple and that's cute. No, yeah, I'm concerned because honestly, if I squeeze it, it looks like pus is going to come out. And so I think that that's the same concept though, when we're talking about, these, self-defense clients versus somebody who comes to the domestic violence services or stuff like that, is like, I see you crying. And people don't normally cry in my self-defense class. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Is that something you want to talk about? Right. Or that bruise has actually 3 different colors to it. So either there's a new one on top of an old one, or you just smack the hell out of that one spot on that corner of that same table every single time. But why is it always that one spot? Because I can see that with my own eyes. And I think that that's the other concept of so there's the thought model, if you will, which kind of goes into all of this, which is, how do you interpret fact versus your interpretation of the fact? The fact is that skin is purple. Your interpretation is, oh, it's purple, what's going on there? And you put all these values towards that fact, right? So I think, again, that the easiest way to start these conversations with people is to state a fact, which is basically an observation that anybody else can make, and they would come up with the same thing without the values. So it's not a hideous bruise, it's a purple discoloration, that kind of thing. It's not oh, she's being emotional. It's there are tears in her eyes, and it looks as though she is trying to have people not see that. Right. Because those don't have qualifiers to it. Aside from, no, bad idea. That, that'd be the opposite of that.
But I think you've got a perfect setup of the open-ended question, because that gives the person the self-realization of oh, somebody else saw this. Maybe it is as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, or my makeup skills are that bad and I tried to cover up the bruise and I'm not fooling anybody. That kind of thing. And again, it's in your approach, right? That's the my thought process when I think about somebody saying something, or when I think about saying something to somebody, is if I can only put my value to it, right? So if I would appreciate it. So to me, in the same concept, it's kind of like that chick who's leaving the bathroom in front of you that has toilet paper on her shoe. You don't know her at all. You don't know her at all. You're probably never going to see her again. All of this other stuff. But dude, I'm just, honey, I'm sorry you have toilet paper on your shoe. I'm just going to step on that. And if that's the way I perceive it, then that's the way that's how I bring it up, right? That's just a fact. You have toilet paper on your shoe. But yeah, I guess, when it comes to having these conversations with people, it has a lot to do with the approach. And it's so much easier as someone who is not their friend, as someone who doesn't see them all the time, as someone who doesn't know how long they have known those family members of him and all this other stuff, to say something. And so it's almost like we should, because it's almost easier when you don't have as much skin in the game.
Right.
I don't know.
Totally.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
So, Amelia, if you would, could you go into a little bit of maybe some of the behaviors or the coping mechanisms that you can look for in your friends before there's the bruise or before it has escalated to having to cover up with makeup, just because I'm the how do I say this? I'm in preventative medicine. I like prehab instead of rehab, and that's kind of where my mind sits. So as I work with survivors, and as I read the stories and listen to the TED Talks and read the articles, there's a part of me that's like, if we could like go back a little bit. Hey, Nicole, if we could go back and maybe have a conversation when the manipulation started and be like, can, you know, can we talk about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So first and foremost, I will say, admittedly, it's going to be difficult for an outside observer to be able to pick up on things that are happening before it becomes um, more overtly abusive, because victim survivors of abuse are very good at putting on a brave face and presenting themselves and their relationship as okay to the outside world. So they aren't going to they're going to be aware of the things that they do and say that could trigger someone to identify something's going on, and they might actively avoid those things. But I think that some of the things that are important to just note, and I talk about this in like our healthcare, um, training that we provide, but it's something that I've even noticed in just neighbors and friends where, having a conversation as I'm walking my dog with a neighbor and our dogs are sniffing each other and we're just talking, and the way that they're carrying themselves, I walk away just with a feeling like chills, like there's something going on in that person's life. Um, and so it's important to first be aware of I think one of the first things that an abuser likes to do is isolate their victim. So, how often are you seeing your friend in person now? Are they often, oh, well, I'm doing something with, my boyfriend or girlfriend tonight, maybe another night. And it's really hard to get some time, just the two of you, to spend time together again. Even maybe to the point where it's kind of a struggle to get in touch with them, to get a text back, to get a call back, to get a phone call without them. You ever been on the phone with somebody and they're talking to someone else in the background the whole time? Like, those are the kinds of things that you might want to identify, because that could be a sign of those initial stages of isolation, of trying to remove your friend or your loved one from you and from other positive, supportive forces in their life. So isolation is a huge key, and having a partner who wants to really dominate their time and have their presence be there. Or like, if you think you're having, just a friend's night and you're going out for drinks, and then their partner shows up with them, and you're like, oh, I thought this was just going to be us, one of those kinds of things. So that's a thing to keep an eye out for as well. Another thing is if you are hanging out just the two of you and their phone keeps blowing up, right? They're getting text after text after text, call after call after call. And they, have to answer the text, and they're sitting there texting while you're trying to have a conversation with them. And they're saying like, oh, I'm sorry, it's just so-and-so, my partner, they just are worried about this, or they're just asking about this. And, that's an important thing to notice, is if, you do get that time with them, but the time is still being in some way, shape, or form dominated by that partner. One thing that I've noticed is people who are going through these things, especially as they start becoming a little more threatening and a little more abusive, maybe emotionally or psychologically, they might just mention it. And we said this on Friday, but they might just mention it like off the cuff. as if it's not that big a deal. Like, oh, well, so and so and how their temper can be, ha ha ha, as if it's like a normal, jokey, everyone kind of goes through this, and how they can be partners, ha ha ha, they might just offhand mention temper, mention jealousy, mention possessiveness, mention those things, but really downplay it and make it feel like it's a normal, okay, not that big a deal kind of occurrence. Another thing, and this is what I noticed the one time I told you with my neighbor as our dogs met, is if they're, oh, God bless you, is if they are overly apologetic, or like every little thing, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Oh, whoa, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry, so sorry, so sorry about every little thing. And you're sitting there like, is there something about me that's making you feel like you need to apologize? Because we're good here. Like, and you have to like continuously reassure them, no, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And yet they're still seeming on edge and overly apologetic. Those kinds of behaviors are things to keep an eye out for. So I think that those are things that we can kind of pick up on early in our friends and loved ones, that we could maybe help us see that something's going on before things become a little more abusive.
Thank you. I think that's important for people who aren't in an abusive relationship to hear, so that if they get into a relationship and they start identifying that kind of behavior, even in themselves, they're like, this isn't right. I shouldn't have to feel this way. And now it's time to have a conversation with my partner, or a come to Jesus moment, and be like, listen, I shouldn't have to feel this way. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but something's not right, and we need to address it. And if you get kickback from that, then it's like, all right, that for me is one of the biggest take-home messages from everything I've learned from you, is that the more you know about what those behaviors look like and sound like, the more you're like, oh, so it's not like it is in the movies. It's not like it is on TV. So, our parents are great, and they're great role models for us. But like you said, some cultures and some lifestyles kind of breed this idea of an unhealthy relationship. And if our children, if our teens don't, if no one ever says to them, it's not a cool thing for your boyfriend to text you when you're out with your friends every hour. That's not cool. Doesn't mean he's a bad person, because he might have been raised in a bad lifestyle as well. And that's when you talk to him, you're like, I know you love me. You texting me every 10 minutes doesn't show me that you love me. It shows me that you're trying to possess me. That's not going to happen. So.
And that's such a huge thing that you bring up. And I just love that you brought that up, is that in these relationships, if I find myself in a relationship where I'm finding things uncomfortable and things are making me uncomfortable, even in the slightest, communicating that to our partners, having these conversations. Yes, it can be uncomfortable. Yes, it can stir up some feelings, and, it might not be the most enjoyable conversation to have, but it's so important to have that conversation with your partner. Hey, when ABC happens, I feel DEF, right? And it's so important for us to be able to feel comfortable, to have conversations with our partner about things that are making us feel uncomfortable, things that are making us feel uneasy and questioning, what's happening here. But it's also important because, like you said, that's a huge key in the, puzzle of unlocking whether or not this is an unhealthy situation. Because if I do have that conversation and my partner invalidates it, makes excuses, gets angry at me, refuses to accept that this is anything that they should be responsible for, that's a major red flag right there. Or on the other hand, if my partner says, oh, yes, you're right, I'm so sorry, I will work on that, works on it for a very short time, and then falls right back into the pattern afterward, that's another red flag to keep an eye out for. So be sure that you're taking the responsibility upon yourself in these relationships to have those difficult conversations and to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is not making me feel safe and comfortable here, and be able to have those conversations with your partner. I think it's a red flag to feel like you can't have that conversation with your partner in the first place.
So one of the biggest things I talk about with self-protection is being able to articulate your own needs. And we start with in our kids program, even when they run away. So we teach children Krav Maga, and Krav Maga is pretty intense. I mean, we teach choke defenses. It's like, oh, how do I teach a 4-year-old how to defend a choke and not make it be weird? So we talk a lot about, your space, inappropriate behavior, appropriate behavior. And we don't, it's not like your first day you walk in and it's the physical. Again, it's always the mental first. But the one thing I say to the kids is like, when you can get free from someone who's doing something inappropriate to you, when you run away, you need to say something about it, because kids get a bad rap. You sit there and you cry and you complain and you're running away from an adult. Us other adults who could help you don't know that you're not having a temper tantrum. So you have to be able to say that something feels wrong, that you've identified it as wrong, and you're going to do something about it. And it's giving those children the ability to problem solve and then articulate their own needs at a very young age. And that, if a child can do it, we should be able to teach that to adults. I think the younger we start, the better it'll be. But if you aren't able to articulate your needs, then that's the first step of self-protection. Sit down and write down, like, what are my needs? What do I need? What makes me feel good? What makes me feel uncomfortable? And then at that point, it kind of gives you a baseline for your normal. And then if anything from your partner or your friends or coworkers gets to cross those lines, you're like, something's off. Let's have a conversation. But if you have no line, if you've set no rule or no boundary, and if you didn't know that you had to set a rule or a boundary, if you weren't raised in a relation, in a family unit like that, then that's where all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, how did this happen? And it's giving a lot of control to everyone around you and taking away a lot of control that you could have. So I think this conversation, for all my self-defense people who have signed on and who are watching, and we have an abundance because Athena's here, and Athena's a legend. There are people signed on that I have never seen signed on in my life. My family members too, because Joy's here. But it's like, you need to, when you start training people about self-protection, because we're in a position to teach people these things, you need to validate their human right to articulate their needs. So
you also have to make them feel that they're worth it. All your stuff that you talk about, all the pre stuff before the fight that you're teaching them, and is so much that they are worth it, that they can say no. That, because it's like it's like you've heard me say it so many times. As we become older, we become the caregivers of society. We're polite. As ladies, we're taught to be polite. In the South, we're taught to be polite and pretty and not cause a distraction and not, draw attention to ourselves for any reason that there's a problem. So it's like going and saying, no, this is okay. I love your phrase, my house, my rules. Yeah. It's making the person feel that they have value to themselves and they're not going to let anybody take that value away.
Yeah. And as friends, as a support group, guys, that's what you can do to help is help your friends remember that it's their house and it's their rules. And, you get to stand up and say, hey, I've made mistakes in the past. and I'm not perfect, and I really messed up in that relationship, or I burned a bridge over here with a friend that I shouldn't have. But that's what makes me human. And I'm going to continue to grow and figure out better ways to say what I mean and mean what I say. And I have a really great support system of friends, family, people you work out with, even people that you work with. And it's just as that friend. And I tell this to people all the time, because I'll have people come in and train, and they are so self-confident. I mean, there's no wavering in them. They know. My friend Lindsay, who was on Friday, that's Lindsay. Lindsay knows this is the state of Lindsay. Take it or leave it. I'm like, you guys need to be that friend that's like, be the state of Anne. You can be the state of Anne. Don't be so wishy-washy. You're cool. Keep being there for your friends, reminding them that their opinion matters, and when their spidey sense starts to get all funky, when their intuition is like, man, this guy or this girl was so awesome, and now that I'm getting to know them a little bit, I'm concerned about their awesomeness. You got to be there for your friend and be like, then have that conversation. Don't be afraid. You having that conversation is important. And like Amelia said, if you're not able to have that conversation, then right then and there, that's that red flag. And it really is, like you had said, Athena, as you are conditioned to be polite and not rock the boat, it's kind of like, oh, it's not my place. I shouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And we got to change that.
I feel like, or even if you can't, okay, this is kind of like that, like those mirrors looking into mirrors, but like if you can't have a conversation about not being able to have the conversation, or you've never had a conversation about having conversations, then like, I know you guys know what I'm talking about when you put the two mirrors together and it's like, it keeps going further and it's like the Matrix, but like, if you can't have the conversations about how you should have conversations, then there's also a problem, right? So like, because honestly, a conversation about not even existing conversations yet should not be that hard because they don't exist yet, right? So it's like, hey, when we get to this crossroad, how do you want to handle this? I'm a better listener at this time of day. All of this other stuff. Should we table it for later? Does that feel yucky? Does that feel like you're tabling it for too long? Decision-making processes, and again, like with relationships, the ideal, okay, and we're going to just make up a normal that we all know doesn't really exist, okay, but it's as 50-50 as it could possibly get, when you go across all of the things, and that each person has their ability to say something, and then you decide together, right? So it's that whole concept of, well, I didn't make that decision, but I'm going along with it and I'm fine because I don't like thinking about that stuff. Or I didn't make that decision and I'm going along with it because honestly, there's no other way. It doesn't happen any other way. And so, yeah, like
it's about like mutuality.
Exactly. That's a better way of saying it, I guess. Yeah.
That's a huge thing that comes up, and I'm like really proud of the teens in Chester County. When I go into the high schools and I talk to teens about healthy dating and healthy relationships, I'll often on the whiteboard draw a big heart and leave the markers there for them. And at the end of the presentation, as they're heading out to their next class, I'll let them know, hey, on your way out, write a trait of a healthy relationship inside of that heart. So many times you see the word mutual trust, mutual respect, mutual affection, mutual, because it's got to go both ways. I love that you brought that up, like mutuality, even if I don't even know.
That's like awesome that they're writing it. Do you take a picture of that heart like every single time? Because okay, that's cool. That's really cool.
It's really,
yeah. Actually,
that's really cool.
One of my favorite things.
And I think another thing, Joy, that I've learned from you is that what you'll say to your husband, who just happens to be my brother, is like on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this to you? Because what happens with Ernie and myself is that we're very different on a lot of things. And, he'll care a whole lot about something. And I'm like, oh, I don't care, whatever. I'm not, I don't have any input right now because I don't care. So on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 for him. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 1 for me. Right. So it's like, we don't need to sit down and come to a 50-50 mark on this. You call the shots. But then there's other things where we both get to that 5, or we both get to the 10 out of 10, where it's super important to us and we have opposing views. That's the time where it's like, all right, we have to sit down and we have to figure out what's best for both of us. So that ways to take the abstractness out of decision making and make it a little bit more concrete for me with that number system helps immensely, because
you do realize, like, I just stole that from the stupid pain scale that we use all the time in medicine. Like, I mean, honestly, I walk into every single one of my exam rooms, and there's the little smiley faces from the super happy to the super cryy with the whatever, and the 0 to 10, and everything is 0 to 10. Everything is 0 to 10. So it's just really easy for me to apply 0 to 10. And then, quite frankly, when I'm examining people and they're like, it hurts a little, and I'm like, I'm going to keep pressing until you give me a number, because I only process numbers. So it must not hurt that bad, because you let me press it 7 times and you still haven't given me a damn number yet. So yeah, the 0 to 10 scale. Although, sometimes Joe, which would be Anne's brother, is should we use a Likert scale? So should it strongly disagree? No, the 0 to 10 is the most ideal. And honestly, it gets really efficient. We've all talked about how I like to be efficient, right? So it's very efficient, because it's yeah, I don't really care what we're having for dinner, and it's a 3. So then the other person literally can just take it and make a decision. So yeah, that communication level of importance. And then again, we all remember that's not set in time. That's not a concrete thing, right? Because the importance to you can eventually change. And then all of a sudden, I really do care what color the walls are going to be. And I do. Before I didn't care. I just wanted it done. But now I really want them blue. For the record, eventually I really want these doors right over here to be white, but they're not white yet. I just wanted to put that out there now that they're in my background. We lost Anne. Oh no. I don't know. It says that the host has not joined yet, but either way. So, Amelia, you really do take pictures of that heart every single time?
Yeah, I have it right here. Hold on. I wonder.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah. So have you seen an evolution of aren't those those word? Okay, I'm gonna sound stupid here, but aren't there's word maps? No, word where they. Yeah, okay. Where the more often the word is said, the bigger the word gets, and then the more few. So are you seeing trends?
We do see trends. A lot of them, the biggest one that we see is trust.
That makes me happy.
Trust
actually,
and respect.
That's a thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it comes down to, I bring that up in the presentation, because we talk about red flag behaviors, and a lot of red flag behaviors, they're really centered in this. Clearly, this individual is struggling with trust, and where that, struggle comes from, that's not up to us to figure out. But if that individual starts working on trusting better, then you can have a healthier relationship. And so when we say, if your partner has to, because a lot of teens deal with, going through each other's phone, and can I have your password, and can I read through your text messages and look at your DMs, and I want to make sure that, you're doing what I'm okay with. Or if you fall asleep, you take a nap, and then they're on your phone when you wake up. You're like, why are you going through my phone? And a lot of times they'll say, because, well, if I can trust you, why can't I go through your phone? And they'll try and spin it in a way where, like, you must be doing something that you don't want me to see if I can't look in your phone about it, so on and so forth. And so what's interesting in that is that we see, the teens will think like, how do I know my partner's not cheating on me if I don't go through their phone? And I say, like, listen, I don't mean to belittle your world, but you're in high school. If your partner's cheating on you, someone's going to tell you. You're going to find out. Like, it's. And then the other thing I say is that we have the one thing I, as a survivor of dating violence specifically, never did was I never listened to my gut. I always talked myself out of my gut feeling and my gut instinct. And I used to think like, oh no, that couldn't be the case because ABC. If your gut is telling you, I think this person's cheating on me, listen to your gut. You don't have to go searching for the evidence. There's something happening that's already making you feel that insecurity and that feeling inside. And if you bring it up to them and they still deny it, but your gut is still feeling it, it might be a good time to reevaluate the relationship. But I ask the teens, I say, if your partner has to look in your phone to trust you, do they really trust you? And they're like, no. I say, okay. And if your partner doesn't trust you, do you think you're in a healthy relationship? No. I'm like, okay, there we go. Bada bing, bada boom. Figured it out.
And it seems easy, but some people need to hear it. Some people need that validation. At least that's what I've noticed. That even with myself, I think the teenage Anne needed an Amelia to say to me, what do you think about this? Doesn't this not add up? And I'm like, no, it doesn't add up. Thank you for pointing that out and giving me kind of that validation. So I think one of the biggest take-home messages for anyone watching is say the things that you think are common sense, or say the things that you think make sense to you, because sometimes in the mind of someone who's going through all this craziness, it gets jumbled, and they don't know which way to turn or what to listen to, and it's not by no fault of your own. That's kind of the mechanism of the manipulation, right? Is that confusion, and you need someone in your corner saying, I get you're confused, but let's lay this out so that you see what's going on, because the abuser is feeding the confusion to make it spin for them. So these kind of conversations are so necessary. And I thank you so much for being here twice in one weekend, and Athena for being here today, because it's not, common sense isn't that common, especially when it gets jumbled in your head when manipulation's involved. And that's when we have to throw the life vest out, or the ring, the life ring, to be like, hey, I'm your friend. I'm your colleague. You want to talk? You want to, the way you answered my, question the other day just made it sound like, you need someone to talk to. Let's grab coffee at lunch. And I think that's the biggest thing, because we do want to be proud and we want to protect and we want to, I'm tougher than this. The modern age of Wonder Woman, I can do it all. I can hold it in and I'll figure it out because I figure everything out. I'm a smart woman. When you have those friends that just shoot you that text like, hey, I noticed, I saw you yesterday. I saw what was going on here. Let's hang out. Be that friend. That's what you can do to help in the beginning. And especially now with, as we're coming out into the yellow phase, you may be seeing it a little bit more often, and don't ignore it. And don't be like, all those memes that are like, check on your strong friends. They need you now. Keep that in mind, that check if your friend has a look in their eye, and it could just be, their kid was sick and they were up all night and they're struggling with adulting today. And if that's what it is, that's what it is. And then if it's not that, then you could potentially be stepping in to save someone's life. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. Just want to say a couple. Let's see. T, good morning. Glenn is excited to see you, Athena. Carl's excited. Carl, my favorite redhead. Good morning, ladies. And Carl wants to know when you're writing your book. Aunt Linda, thank you for joining your first time. Pleasure to have you here. Lots of different people have signed on. Nicole says hello. Logan says hi. Hey, Logan. Stephanie Dawn. I'm not sure I know Stephanie, but and then Athena, your mom said, we Southern women make our needs known. We just tell it to the one who needs to know, and we do it so nicely they think it was their idea.
That's mom. That's mom.
Let's see. And then Alan Garcia, everybody's jumping on now and saying hi to Athena. So I think Athena, you'll have to jump on with me another time and we'll just chit chat about some self-defense applications. And Katie Staffelbach, the OG, the original gangsta, is here watching as well. I don't have any questions for you guys. I know Lindsay had a question from last time. She was wondering if, Amelia, you had talked about the hotline.org for the national hotline for domestic violence. And she's wondering if they have Spanish speaking assistance.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I went on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, go ahead.
And we do as well at Chester County. So if you're in Chester County and you speak Spanish, you can call our hotline. We have several Spanish-speaking advocates, but also if you speak any language whatsoever, we have a translation service through our hotline. So that's something that we can easily assist with. Yes, absolutely.
Do you guys have any ending thoughts? Anything that you were dying to say that I cut you off, or anything you want to add for today?
I never really thought I had anything to say.
The one thing that
I know. I love that. Joy's like, I don't have anything to say. And it's like, do you have any idea how much you drove the conversation?
Yeah, but she had such good points about things. I mean, realistically, because it's like, she's looking at it from a doctor's point of view going, hey, well, you can do this, or how'd that work out for you? But the trick to it is I think so much of it is recognizing, like what she said, it's a gray area. That it's like, the person's been doing this for 6 weeks and, you've got this big gangrene thing coming out and you're like, well, how'd that work out? Not so well. But recognizing that as a person that sees it for a friend, that we may not be able to save them, but how can we help them? Because that's the hardest thing, is trying to say, I want to go save my friend, but at least how can I help them? Or how can I help them help themselves? Is just realization of like, it didn't work or this isn't good. So I think that's a big thing that she was saying that was like a real good takeaway, that there's a very gray area. And then the other thing is seeing it in your friend and saying, maybe taking a look at different resources, knowing that looking at what the Domestic Violence Center has, like the other night on the talk, you were talking about what's on your website, information of what to say to your friend. That was a great point, is how to go and also maybe educate yourself when you see it in your friend, so that you don't put your foot in your mouth and go, ooh, damn, But those are the things I think is realization of that. And then if you're in where you're getting the red flags, if you're in a relationship where you're getting the red flags, that is okay for you to recognize it and say, this is not good for me. That is absolutely okay for you to say, this is not healthy, safe, or loving for me. And then start looking at, what do I want to do about it? But a lot of people don't even know to go on the website for the Domestic Violence Center to get information about looking at, hey, I've seen this in my friend. What do I need to do? They don't know to look for the resources.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, because we tried to make all of that accessible as possible, not just on the website, but even on our social media. But then the other thing, and I'll always say this, is that the hotline is not just for victim survivors. It is for friends and family members, significant others, people who want to actually ask, a trained counselor advocate, what can I say? What can I do? And so, if you've gone on the website and you're still not finding the right tools, call us. And we're here for you. Yeah, for sure.
And while you're on the website looking up resources, click the donate now button, because in order for these resources to continue to be here for us and for our friends, we need to support our local domestic violence center. So,
and we have a fun opportunity to donate right now. We're doing a virtual auction. So there are a ton of fantastic items that you can bid on, from trips to spa experiences, jewelry, art, gift baskets, also, sports memorabilia. Father's Day is coming up if you're looking for something for dad. So that's going on all week long. It ends on Saturday the 20th at 9:00. So please feel free to make a donation and get a prize out of it. But all the proceeds go to supporting our services.
All right. Well, thank you all again. Thank you, Joy, for tuning in from Virginia. And Athena and Amelia are both local, but thank you for tuning in as well to talk with me this morning. Guys, if you have any comments, questions, if you're watching this on the replay, leave the question in the comments section. We can get back to you. And like Amelia said, if you hit up the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, which is dvccc.org, there'll be
dvccpa.org.
There's lots of information and let's see. Ted Cam just posted the number for the hotline. Ted Cam, wonderful friend of our school, and he's very often been the bad guy in the self-defense class, and he's amazing with helping our students feel like they could beat the heck out of somebody. So look forward to beating up Ted when we can go back to training. So thank you all. It's from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate your time and your expertise. More than one, there's always more than one perspective, and we can learn so much if we just ask. So I appreciate you guys saying yes when I asked. All right. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.